I welcome you all to the module 5 of this course. So, the module 5 is about psychoanalysis. Typically, we will be talking about Sigmund Freud's theory. We will not go too much into the Neo-Freudians and other concepts. So, we will be focusing more on psychoanalysis as proposed by Sigmund Freud. So, this module has 2 lectures. Both the lectures are associated with psychoanalysis only. So, this is the first part of psychoanalysis, that is lecture number 10, and it is the first lecture of this module 5. So, before we talk about today's lecture, let me give you a brief recap of the last lecture. So, last lecture was from the last module actually, which was about trait theory, and in the last lecture we more specifically talked about 5-factor model, hexagon model and dark triad of personality. So, in the 5-factor model we discussed that this is probably the most accepted and has received the best the evidence which are possible in the research areas, where this theory says that human personalities could be described using the 5 factors or 5 personality traits, which are neuroticism, extroversion, openness, agreeableness and conscientiousness. So, these are the 5 factors which according to this theory can be used to describe all varieties of human traits that are possible, and research evidence supports this theory largely from diverse samples and cultures and so on. Hexagon model actually basically tried to add one more dimension to this 5-factor model. So, they made it a 6-factor model. So, though along with this 5-factor model they also added one more trait which is called as a humility modesty trait. However, the researcher and many psychologists in the area of the trait, they are of the view that this addition of the 6th factor has not much contributed in terms of giving additional information. Consequently, this model has not become that popular. Then we discussed the dark triad of personality, which basically talks about certain negative behavioral traits associated with certain personality traits, which includes typically 3 important traits which are associated with negative behavioral tendencies, like Machiavellianism, narcissism and psychopathy. So, we discussed all details about all these theories in the last lecture. So, let us start today's lecture. So, in the today's lecture we will be talking about, we will be introducing the basic ideas behind psychoanalysis as proposed by Sigmund Freud. So, we will be talking about the concept of psychic determinism, instincts, structure of mind, structure of personality, and at the end we will be talking about primary and secondary thinking processes. So, Sigmund Freud is probably the most famous name in the field of psychology. People from other disciplines, even laymen also heard about his name. So, it basically shows the impact of his theories in the collective consciousness of humanity. So, his theory has a very deep, far-reaching impact on understanding of human mind. He revolutionized the explanation and the conceptualization of human mind, psychological disorders and the treatment of disorders. His theory was equally very controversial, because some of the aspect of his theory received a lot of criticism, but whatever the case may be, his impact and his influence in the understanding of human psychology and the other fields of inquiries cannot be neglected. So, that is why he is the most famous name, most celebrated name in the field of personality. So, we will be talking because his theory is very complex and it has so many aspects, we will not be able to go into every details of his theory, but we will be try to summarize some of the major concept of his theories in these 2 lectures. So, when we talk about psychoanalysis as the school of thought that was proposed by Sigmund Freud, so it is a kind of theory of personality and that has a lot of therapeutic implications and understanding of psychological disorders and treatment of disorders. Now, as I already said that his influence, especially in terms of influence that he has on the understanding or in the field of psychology and many other disciplines, is unparalleled. Even though not everything about his theory was accepted, lot of theory aspect of his theory was criticized. We will be looking into some of these aspects, but his influence, there is no doubt about it that his influence is unparalleled. His psychoanalytic system was the first comprehensive theory of personality that remains the most well known. Even for the people beyond psychology or people who are not even in the field of psychology. People know about his theory, and his theory has been applied in the different fields and different applied aspects also. So, Freud's work not only shaped psychology and psychiatry, but also significantly impacted our understanding of human nature. So, basic understanding of human nature, what is the structure of human mind and how do you explain psychological disorders, in that context he has given some fundamental contribution. Even after his death, so he was born in 1856, he was a Austrian neurologist, he was trained in the neurology, and then he developed interest in the field of psychological disorders, particularly some disorders where there is the causal aspect is in the mind and the symptoms appears in the body like hysteria and other thing. So, he got interested into some of these patients, and as a result he started looking into this aspect and he developed psychoanalysis out of all this. And even after his death in 1939, Freud's legacy still persists, with the New York Times recognizing him the most effective disturber of complacency in our time. So, because his theory has kind of is very given some of the ideas which kind of disturbs the conventional ideas. So, in that sense he is said as the disturber of complacency in our time. So, many subsequent we will see what are those ideas. Many subsequent personality theories either built upon Freud works, lot of other theories evolved out of his theories, or they emerge as a response to it or as a criticism to it. So, that is the influence, Many theories also came out of his theory, and many theories actually came in opposition to his theory also. So, this underscores his enduring impact in the field. One of the basic concept that he talks about is called as psychic determinism. So, when we use the word determinism, it basically talks about causal effect. So, when something is deterministic, that means there is a cause and there is an effect. So, similarly, there is a psychic determinism, means even in the mental world things are determined, there are clear cut causal factors which can be used to explain things. So, the psychoanalytical approach fundamentally relies on the principle of psychic determinism. So, the whole theory of the field of theory of psychoanalysis has a fundamental idea which is called as a psychic determinism, which says that every mental event, thought and behavior has a specific cause. So, whatever thoughts we have, whatever behavior we show, whatever mental event that occurs within us has a specific cause. So, nothing is random. So, this deterministic view basically aligns with the broader scientific notion that all phenomena can be causally explained. So, the idea is it comes from the basic idea of science that every phenomena can be explained using some causal factors which comes before that, leaving no room for randomness, free will or miracles. So, there is no such thing as randomly happening some behavior. According to psychoanalysis, every behavior has certain causal factors. Now, psychoanalysts argue against just simplistic and superficial explanation of behavior. So, they are not just interested in saying very superficial explanation of why certain behavior happens. They seek more deeper explanations. Often they try to pinpoint the causal factor in the deeper unconscious aspect of the mind. So, in that sense they try to reach in the deeper part of the human mind, which is unconscious mind. We will see what is that unconscious mind, and according to Freud, lots of human behavior and the causal factors of human behavior lies in the unconscious mind. So, that is one idea of psychoanalysis, that there is a psychic determinism. Another important concept that is associated with the theory of psychoanalysis is the concept of instincts. So, according to psychoanalysis, there are two types of instincts. So, basically what is instinct according to psychoanalysis? So, he was influenced by some of the ideas of the evolutionary theory of Charles Darwin, and he proposed that instincts provide an answer to the mind body problem. So, it is a kind of link between mind and body. Just as body uses energy for its function, Freud believes that mind operates on similar energy, which he called as a psychic energy. So, So, we have a psychic energy that runs human mental functioning, as we need physical energy to kind of for the body to run its kind of all its functioning aspects. So, this psychic energy powers mental processes. So, even for every thought processes we need some energy. So, that energy the source of that energy or the name of that energy is psychic energy. So, psychic energy powers mental processes such as thinking, imagination and remembering. Now, drawing from the law of conservation in physics, Freud said that energy within the mind body system is conserved. So, there is an energy in the body that runs the body or functioning of the body, then there is an energy that runs the psychological functionings. So, Freud says that energy within this mind body system is conserved and can transform from physical and psychic form. So, they can get transformed from one form of the energy to the another form of energy. So, psychic body can go into the psychic energy can transform into bodily energy can get transformed into psychic energy and so on. So, there is a conservation of energy, it does not get destroyed, it kind of get transformed from one form to the another form of energy. Now, according to him, instincts are like mental representation of physical or body need. So, whenever there is a bodily need or bodily or physical need or an impulse arises, how it is represented in the mind is instinct. So, Freud originally used a German word for this instinct called Trab, but the English word impulse is also kind of another word in the English language that can be used to represent the word instinct, which also accurately captures this concept. Now, instinct or impulse can be thought of a tension or excitation that originates within the body. So, most of these instincts or impulse, it starts from the body with a certain excitation or certain tensions in the body, and then it kind of demands its satisfaction. Each bodily needs generates its own impulse. See? So, whenever there is some kind of need arises in the body, it creates certain impulse which motivates people to kind of satisfy those impulses. So, that is kind of instinct that originates in the body. This impulse creates a sensation in the body that demands satisfaction, similar to the itch that must be scratched. Since impulses are always present, a certain amount of tension is constantly felt in the human system. So, there are various ways to satisfy these impulses, either through broad, if the impulse is mostly predominantly in the body sensation. So, bodily action can satisfy those impulses, or through mental processes one can satisfy it. So, habitual method by which people try to gratify or fulfill those impulses shapes the personality of human being. So, we have different kinds of impulses within the body or instincts that originates in the body, and that motivates human being to satisfy those bodies, because there is a corresponding body sensation that wants its satisfaction. So, the habitual ways, people develop certain habitual ways of satisfying these impulses. How you try to satisfy those impulses also kind of determines or shapes the kind of personality we have. So, this is one idea that he has. Now, according to Freud, these instincts, all the instincts that we have, all the impulses that we have can be divided into two broad categories. One is called as a life instincts, which is technically Freud is to call it as a eros, or another is death instinct, which Freud is to call as thanatos. So, these are like Greek terminologies which he was fond of using in his theories. Lot of such terms he has used in the theory. So, life instinct and death instincts. So, basically what is life instinct? So, life instinct is about instincts to survive, to propel life more and more. So, whatever we do to make our life more in terms of whatever propels our life. So, that is called as a life instinct. So, it focuses on survival. So, whatever we do to survive and want to survive at any cost, and we do a lot of things around it to survival, just to survive in life and to make our life best of its whatever ability. So, all these are connected with the life instincts. So, life instinct within us wants to expand and make our life expand and survive and so on. So, it may include lot of things like it propels us to take food, water, air and sexual behavior and so on. All these are connected to the life instincts to propagate life and so on. So, the energy associated with life instinct is called as libido. So, he used another term libido. So, life instincts, so there is an energy generates which propels us to live life, survive life, expand our life. So, the energy behind it, behind the life instinct is called as libido. So, according to Freud, the sexual energy has the highest became synonymous with the word libido, the most crucial instinct according to Freud, because that propagates life and so on. So, contemporary psychodynamic or people who are associated with psychoanalysis, obviously they place less emphasis on the sexual instinct and as a determinant of human personality, but they focus more on relationships, self esteem and other social aspects. But Freud was giving much more importance on the sexual instinct as the most prominent life instinct. Freud also says in the later part of his life that we don't not only have a life instinct, people also have death instinct. Now, death instinct is something sometimes people are also propelled to kill and propelled for aggression, either to kill others, kill self and so on. So, sometimes because probably after seeing lot of world wars and mass killing of people, he became more convinced that people are also motivated by sometimes death instincts. So, Freud observed that living things decay and die, everything dies including human beings, leading him to propose that death and destructions are inborn instincts. He termed it as a thanatos, as a term. His exploration of thanatos was less developed. Obviously, he has not given much emphasis on this instinct because probably it is the later part of his life where he talked about it. His life instinct, he talked a lot about it in his theory. We do not find similar explanations and focus on death instincts, it was less developed. He primarily focused on human aggression in terms of as an indicator of death instinct. Why people become aggressive and people attack other people, kill other people and so on. So, that is a part of death instinct. Today most psychologists, many people reject this idea of death instinct because it is evolutionary unsound. Evolutionary principles always wants to propel life, propagate life. Death instinct seems to be an opposite principle of evolutionary principle, because if death instinct is there, then the life will kill itself and it is just not that does not fit with the principles of evolution. But anyway, there are a lot of evidence that he observed in human beings that led him to believe that there are death instinct also, and there may be some truth in it also. But obviously, it is less developed as compared to the life instinct. So, here is a comparison of these two. We have already kind of discussed most of this comparison. It is more about survival life instinct, death instinct is more about destruction, any instinct that lead us to destroy other things, whatever it is, destroy in terms of things or humans or whatever it is. Primary focus is maintaining life and continuation of life. Death instinct primary focus is on aggression as a death instinct. In the life instincts include basic needs necessary for survival such as food, water, air, sex and so on. Libido or the life energy is associated with life instinct. Death instinct is often expressed as a destructive impulse, self-destruction behavior, aggressive tendencies. So, whenever human beings are under the influence of aggression, destruction, they are typically guided by the death instinct. It ensures that life instinct ensures survival and propagation of the species. Death instinct leads to behavior that can result in harm and even death. Mostly the energy associated with life instinct is libido. Here Thanatos does not has a clearly defined as eros. He did not talk very clearly what kind of energy, and he did not give any specific name. Under life instinct, Freud focuses more on sexuality. Under death instinct, Freud focuses more on aggression as a death instinct. So, these are some of the differences between these two. Freud theory focused or given lot of emphasis on primarily sexuality as a life instinct and aggression as a death instinct. So, many people many time kind of criticize his theory by saying his theory can be just reduced to these two words, sexuality and aggression. However, that is not true, because his theory has many other aspects to it. Reducing this theory only to this element is not true, because we will see some of the other things associated with it. So, many times Freud also tried to address these issues, that why, if we are primarily our drive or instinct is about, life instinct is primarily about sexuality and death instinct is aggressive act, why don't people all the time engage into it? People also do lot of things. If that is the only drive or impulse that human being have, then they should be engaging in that all the time, but that is not happening with, if you see the human behavior at large. Freud explained that socialization teaches us to hide these impulses and express them in a more socially acceptable ways. So, people, human beings, they do not just all the time express whatever the impulse or instincts they have. Socialization process comes into the process in the picture, where many times we hide those impulses or repress them and try to express them in a more socially acceptable ways. So, according to the law of conservation of energy, libido cannot be destroyed. So, ungratified instinct manifest in unconscious ways. So, many times when people, let us say, they are not able to express lot of life instincts including sexuality and so on, it may get expressed in the mental forms in terms of fantasies and so on. So, because that energy cannot be destroyed, so it will get transformed into mental forms of expression and so on. So, that is some of the ideas associated with his instinct. So, Freud also talked about the structure of mind. So, we discussed some of the, we are talking about the basic ideas of psychoanalysis. So, we talked about psychic determinism as one of the basic idea, then we talked about instincts and how they impact personality. Now, let us talk about the structure of mind. So, when we talk about structure of mind, Freud has made some fundamental contribution in this context. Because before Freud, people were in the field of psychology particularly were mostly focusing on one aspect of the mind, that is conscious mind. So, if you are able to think and remember or whatever thought processes are going on, we are aware of it, and people used to think mind is only this. Freud looked into the human mind, and he said human mind has many other layers to it. So, there are different levels of mind. So, he said primarily there are three levels of human mind. One is conscious mind, another is subconscious mind, which is also called as a preconscious mind, and the third one is called as an unconscious mind. So, it is the one mind which has a different levels to it. So, it is not like these are three separate minds, no, it is one mind, but there are three different levels to it based on to what extent we are aware of its contents. So, conscious mind, there can be subconscious mind or preconscious mind, some people call it preconscious mind also, and the unconscious mind. So, this division is primarily based on the level of awareness that we have about the content of the mind. We are not fully aware of all the content of our mind. We are aware of some content, we are less aware of some other content, we are not at all aware of some contents. So, based on that awareness, the structure of mind he divided into conscious, subconscious and unconscious mind. So, conscious mind means what? It basically includes all the thoughts, memories, feelings, whatever we are aware of or conscious in the moment. So, at this moment, if mostly whatever thinking process going on, a part of mind which is actively processing information, I am aware of it. So, that is a part of my conscious mind. So, whatever content of our mind which we are aware of in a moment, that actually comes under conscious mind. So, mostly in the waking state, mostly at the practical level, whatever the mind that we apply to process and solve problems and deal with the problems of our life, most of it is actually conscious part of the mind. Now, preconscious or subconscious mind consists of thoughts, feelings and memories that are not fully conscious in the moment, but can easily be brought into conscious mind. Okay. So, this part of the mind is neither fully conscious nor fully unconscious. So, it is a kind of in between the stage. So, the content of the subconscious mind it is not automatically conscious, but it is not fully unconscious also. If you focus a little bit, the content could come into the conscious part of the mind. For example, you may not recall the name of a person you met in the past. Many times it happens that we are not able to remember the name of a person, but it seems like in the tip of my tongue that I can remember, but still it is not fully in my memory, or it is not fully in my consciousness. But with some effort, if I think a little bit about it, or I get a little bit of clues here and there, that name may be recalled, or it may come into my conscious mind. So, like this kind of content are part of the subconscious part of the mind. So, this part of the mind is more like a mental waiting room. So, its certain contents are in the waiting room, they are not fully outside, not fully kind of in the unconscious part of mind. So, those type of content are in the subconscious part of the mind. The last part is called as unconscious mind, and Freud given the highest emphasis on this part of mind. It includes all mental processes that are inaccessible and outside our consciousness. So, there is a part of mind which is fully unconscious. It has lot of contents, but we are not aware of any of this content, what is going on in that part of mind. However, Freud said even though it is unconscious, we are not aware of what is there in that content of mind, it influences our behavior and thoughts continuously and is a major source of behavior. However, this content all the time influences us. We may not remember what is there, we do not get access to what is there in the content, but the content all the time expresses itself in human behavior. So, it is influencing, but we are not aware of. So, that is the unconscious part of mind. It mostly consists of repressed, unpleasant, unacceptable experiences and feelings. According to Freud, this is the largest part of our mind. This is the largest part of our mind. Whatever things we repressed, so anything that is not unacceptable, let us say you experience certain emotions and something, some kind of thought processes you do not want to remember, which are traumatic, problematic, we repress them, or mind automatically push this content into the unconscious mind. So, lot of this unconscious content of mind, these are not very pleasant, they may have lot of emotional traumatic memories and so on. So, whatever things we repress or kind of things which are not acceptable, which we do not want to experience consciously because these are uncomfortable, those kind of thoughts or content of the mind or memories, there is a mechanism of the mind which automatically pushes back to them in the unconscious part of the mind, and they keep accumulating there. So, anything that is disturbing, traumatic, even though you may not be aware of what is there, but they will disturb you emotionally all the time, because it is there in the in the unconscious part of your mind. So, Freud says unfortunately that part of mind is the largest, it has the highest content, because this gets accumulated and so on, content gets accumulated in that part of the mind. So, in order to give more clarity on how these different levels of mind functions, Freud gave an iceberg analogy. So, when you put an iceberg, a piece of ice in the water, how it looks? A small portion of the iceberg remains above the water, and large part of the iceberg actually goes below the water. So, our conscious, subconscious and preconscious mind can be understood from this iceberg analogy. It is more like this. So, let us say this is the iceberg, a piece of ice floating on water. So, the part of the ice which is above the water, it is like it is conscious mind, because we are aware of what is there in that part of the mind. Now, the part of the mind which is visible, which is not fully above the water, they are below the water, but still visible. So, if you put any object on water, a part of it, whatever is below the water, there is a part below the water which is not visible, and there is a part of object that is visible even though it is below the water. So, that part is called as a preconscious mind. So, it is not fully unconscious, means it is still visible, but it is not fully above the water also. So, that is like analogy of preconscious or subconscious mind, and a large part of iceberg is actually below the water, which is not visible. So, it is that part is mostly like unconscious part of the mind. So, if you put an iceberg on a water, you can very easily see that largest part of the iceberg actually goes below the water. So, that is the analogy Freud used to explain these levels of human mind. So, although Freud described these 3 levels of mind, conscious, preconscious and unconscious mind, there is no clear cut division between them. You cannot clearly say this is where it ends and this is where another thing starts, because this is one mind. It only depends on to what extent you are aware of something. So, sometimes all these contents could kind of interact with each other. Part of the unconscious mind can come to the conscious mind. So, there is a dynamic interaction in those 3 parts of the mind. So, there is no clear cut division like this is where it ends and this is where another thing starts, like that. It is more dynamic. Instead, there are different levels or degrees within each. For instance, repression may weaken over time. Sometimes we are not, our conscious mind is not very strongly regulating contents or thoughts. Unconscious material may come up in the conscious mind. That is possible, because it is already there, it is not lost. So, that those content which are unconscious can come to the conscious mind under certain circumstances, whenever your conscious mind is not very strongly regulating thoughts and so on, you become little loose in the vigilance and so on. So, this unconscious material typically appears in modified forms such as in dreams. So, what is the proof that there is an unconscious mind? One of the most important proof of unconscious mind is that the dream state. What happens in dream state? In dream state, conscious mind is fully asleep, it is not at all working. Then whatever content on figures and pictures we see in the dream, from where it is coming? We are not aware at that time, no? Conscious mind is sleep, in the sleeping stage. So, even then we are seeing so many contents and thought processes happening, so many stories happening in the dream. All these are coming from the unconscious part of the mind. So, this unconscious mind can express itself in the dreams, because at that time conscious mind is fully asleep. So, unconscious mind gets an open access, it can come out, there is no regulation of the conscious mind. Sometimes this unconscious mind also expresses symptoms of illnesses or psychological disturbances during stressful times. So, unconscious mind can also express in certain disorders. So, many disorders has mental origin, there are no physical origin, because they are not caused by any physical factors, but they are caused by mental factors. For example, if somebody experiences stress for a long time, that can lead to many physical diseases like heart diseases and so on. Many times, if people remain emotionally disturbed for a long time, it can express in terms of various diseases in the body itself also, and psychological disorders also, or the emergence of apparently alien impulses under the influence of drugs and alcohol. So, when people take things like alcohol and drugs, lot of unconscious content actually comes up, because conscious mind become loose, it loses its discriminatory abilities, and people may behave very strangely and very differently as compared to when they are sober and normal. Why this happens? Because at that time lot of unconscious content of the mind could take hold of that person, and they behave very very differently than what they actually the kind of person. You can completely see is a totally changed person. So, a lot of this content of unconscious mind could take over and influence that person. So, people may behave very aggressively or may behave in such a way that it is not possible to think that this person can behave like that. So, all these are possible because so many unconscious impulses could come out. So, that can also happen. So, these unconscious impulses could express itself in different forms. So, many times, for example, a quiet student who seems easygoing and unassertive may under the influence of alcohol become ready to argue and shadow and become loud and quite aggressive. So, you might have seen a lot of people who are normally quiet, but when they take alcohol they become loud and aggressive and so on. So, what is happening here is drugs and alcohol act as a disinhibitor. So, conscious mind, all the filters are now not working. So, when the conscious mind filters are not working, so unconscious mind can come out, making unconscious urges more likely to emerge into one's conscious part of the mind. Now, how can we uncover that unconscious, because this unconscious mind is influencing us all the time. So, what are the basically proofs of those unconscious content, and how can we uncover that? What are the ways by which we can get access to that unconscious part of the mind? So, Freud discussed many processes by which we can get access to this part of the unconscious mind. Some of the things like hypnosis, free association, it is a technique developed by Freud for treatment of psychological disorders. So, that can also be used to uncover unconscious problems and conflicts and issues with the content of the unconscious mind. Dreams are another ways of looking at unconscious mind. Freudian slips means slip of the tongue. Sometimes people say something that they do not want to say, suddenly it comes to their mouth. That also reflects, according to Freud, a lot of this slip of tongue could be also a reflection of unconscious mind. Sometimes the way people use humor can have some connection with the unconscious expression. So, they have something in the unconscious part of mind that can get expressed in a more socially acceptable ways in the form of humor, or sometimes also symbolic behavior. So, let us see very briefly each of this one. Hypnosis, because we will not go into too much of that. Hypnosis is more of a technique that was used where suggestions are given to a person to slowly and the conscious part of the mind is put into sleep. So, what happens then, slowly the suggestions can be given to the subconscious, and the slowly content of unconscious mind one can get access, somebody who is giving suggestions and so on. So, it is more of a structured thing. Freud initially used hypnosis as a method to get access to unconscious mind, then he found it has its own problems in terms of you have to put somebody in a special state, which may not be easy for everybody, because everybody is not equally suggestible. You cannot put everybody in the state of hypnosis so easily. Some are more easily can be hypnotized, some are not so easily, it is not so easy to hypnotize many people. So, he used something called as a free association, which became a hallmark of psychoanalytic treatment or of psychological disorder. So, mostly what happens, people are in order to understand the causes in the unconscious part of mind, psychoanalysts including Freud, what he used to do, he used to sit not directly face to face, somewhere or sometimes they used to cover also. So, the patient is not directly looking at the therapist, and they are asked to sleep in a relaxed way without any kind of tension and so on, and they are slowly start talking with them, and all the controls and filters of conscious mind in the relaxed state the person slowly loses. And as they become more comfortable in talking to the therapist, a lot of this unconscious content could come up in the conversation, where a trained and expert psychoanalyst could understand the conflicts and problems of that person. So, this is typically how it is done. So, but it is a cornerstone of Freud's psychoanalytical therapy, which originated when a colleague noticed that individuals disclose their innermost thoughts and desires during hypnosis session. So, it came from the hypnotism also, but Freud initially used hypnosis with patient, but soon realized a relaxed state is much better and comfortable than an altered state, because in hypnosis you have to put people into an altered state, which is much more difficult. So, simple that work can be done using a relaxed state. So, Freud used free analysis as compared to hypnosis later. So, even today psychoanalysis often occurs with the patient lying down, fostering relaxation and facilitating uninhibited expression. So, they are asked to say whatever comes to their mind without any judgment, silly small things, whatever it is. In free association everything is allowed. So, when everything allows, there is no need for filtering what should I say and what should I not say. Those conscious mind filter is not there, then unconscious mind, the patterns and problems in the unconscious aspect could be easily detected. So, during free association, patients speak without conscious control, monitoring or censorship, potentially revealing unconscious thoughts. So, that is the idea behind free association. Now, Freud also used to do something called as dream analysis, because according to him, dreams are also reflection of unconscious mind. So, Freud believed that dream analysis, detailed examination of the dream, what kind of dream people see, and the kind of symbolism that appears in the dream can provide insight into unconscious mind. Freud famously said, the interpretation of dream is the royal road to the knowledge of the unconscious activities of the mind. So, one of the easiest and best way to get access to unconscious mind is reading or interpreting the dreams of the people. So, dream analysis allowed Freud to decode the hidden unconscious meaning of the dreams. During sleep, the unconscious mind could freely express thoughts, dreams and desires. Whatever things were suppressed in the unconscious mind, everything comes up in a symbolic form. So, one has to decode the meaning of those symbols. So, they had an elaborate interpretation process. For that, obviously training is required and so on. So, Freud posited that dreaming acted as a safety bulb, permitting a controlled release of unconscious tension accumulated by the instincts. So, controlled way things comes up in the dream, and because direct expression of this dark urges can be unsafe and person can become highly disturbed. So, dream gives an controlled access to that. So, they reveal themselves through dreams in a symbolic form. So, what different forms of dreams we see all have a symbolic meaning, maybe somebody is flying without any which is not possible in the real world. So, which may have its meaning, that somebody may see a snake, which may have some other reasons. So, they had an elaborate explanation of all these things. So, dreams enable the fulfillment of wishes and instinct in a safe symbolic manner. So, dreams are mostly, according to Freud, is wish fulfillment. We wanted so many different wishes that are suppressed. So, they get expressed and we try to fulfill them in the dreams and so on. Freud also said unconscious mind could also express itself in terms of mistakes that we do in speaking and acting, which he called as parapraxis. Parapraxis are mostly the mistakes that we do in terms of speaking and acting. Freud proposed that mistakes in thoughts or deed are not accidental, but rather manifestation of our unconscious urges. So, these errors known as parapraxis encompasses slip of tongue, bungled actions, forgetting names, misreadings and other chance actions, all of which reveals hidden desires. So, different kinds of mistakes that can happen according to Freud, which can express the unconscious desires and unconscious mind and so on. So, one type of parapraxis is slip of tongue or errors in speech. While Freud presented numerous examples of slip of tongue, contemporary research suggests that not all slip of tongue can be connected to unconscious impulses. Some may be connected, but many times people do normal errors in speaking also. Verbal errors can result from priming or cognitive indecisions over word choice. So, people may not get the right appropriate word to discuss something. So, those may not be associated with the unconscious mind and so on. But Freud said that the varieties of slip of tongue could be associated with unconscious intention. For example, let us say during a conversation someone wanted to say, your performance was unbelievable. Let us say this was what he was trying to say to the another person, because somebody has performed something and he wanted to say your performance was unbelievable. Instead, the person says, suddenly it comes to his mouth that, so he wanted to compliment that person, but the person says your performance was unremarkable, something which is not so great. So, he wanted to say performance was unbelievable. Instead, the person automatically says the your performance was unremarkable, which might actually reflect his true unconscious intention. He wanted to say actually this unremarkable, but he was trying to say unbelievable. So, the actual intention actually came out through the slip of tongue. So, this is an example. So, Freud says many of such slip of tongue could sometimes reflect your unconscious desires and wishes and so on. Another form of parapraxis is accidental or mistaking action. Sometimes we do different kinds of actions which are not what we intended to do, but it happens. For example, some woman experiencing, this is what Freud actually gave an example, a woman experiencing pre-wedding anxiety, jitters, whose veil was torn by her fiancé accidentally closing the car door and so on. Let us say some kind of mistake happens just before the wedding and so on. For a woman, because already lot of anxiety was there in that situation, accidentally the veil, because at that their culture, there is the bride generally wears a veil, thin veil. So, that is a part of the culture. Let us say it get accidentally torn by while closing the door and so on. Subsequent mishap, because the bride is under so much of tension and anxiety, subsequent mishap including collapse bookcase, damaging her foot and broken glass injuring her thumb seem to compound her misfortune. So, then many times it happens one after the other, many misfortune happens one after the other, that reflects an unconscious anxiety and so on. No, that leads so many mistaken actions one after the other, one thing starts and then another. So, that culminates many times, such things may even series of accident can culminate into pattern that might reflect a deeper emotional unrest evidenced by the couples eventual sometimes divorce also. No, that is an obviously extreme case, but lot of such incidents which happens, one starts and then another, which reflects an unconscious inner emotional unrest the person had, that gets reflected into all these behaviors. Freud also says sometimes humors people use, what kind of humors people use also a reflection of their unconscious mind. Even jokes, especially spur of moment, sometimes people use without really thinking consciously, spur of moment sometimes people use certain jokes and spontaneous reaction which can also come out from the unconscious desires and so on. Jokes provide a socially acceptable avenue for expression of aggression and sexual desires through laughter. Many individuals who would not typically express such impulse, let us say some people use sexual jokes and so on in the spur of the moment. People use bathroom humors and jokes based on unflattering stereotypes and gender, height, hair color, religion, ethnicity. Lot of this could actually reflection of their unconscious mind, what is the makeup of their unconscious mind. So, these normally taboo thoughts which are normally you cannot express them. So, when you express them through humor, it becomes more acceptable in the context of jokes and so on. Although consciously we might dismiss them, I was only kidding, the impulse expressed are quite real to many people of their unconscious mind. People also can express unconscious mind in the symbolic behavior. Another way is hidden instinct could express through symbolic behavior. Symbolic behaviors allows, because you do apparently you are doing some kind of behavior, but it is not it may be connected to something deeper. So, that is the idea of symbolic behavior. Here symbolic behavior allows us to safely express our impulses under guise of some more benign actions. For example, individuals with oral fixation. So, that is a kind of personality characteristics that we will be discussing in the next lecture, that during childhood some people get fixated in the pleasures around the oral area during the childhood. So, sometimes people get fixated in that, and then in the later when they get into adulthood, still that fixation remains, and it may be expressed more symbolically, where the person may start smoking, eating too much, or even biting, sarcasm, or all the time using sarcasm for the people which are very biting. This could a symbolic reflection according to Freud for a lot of this other deeper unconscious reasons. So, this oral behavior symbolize or stand in as a more acceptable ways of obtaining gratification which may be sexual in nature and so on. So, like that lot of behaviors could express itself symbolically, where connection could lie in the unconscious part of the mind. Now, Freud also talked about the structure of human personality. When we say structure, means what are the components of human personality. So, he said human personality has three major components, one is id, ego and superego. He said human personality is composed of these three structures. So, let us see what are these three structures. Freud viewed human personality as energy system, because as we have already seen, he talked only in terms of energy, psychic energy and the bodily energy which get converted into one another. So, this whole human system is energy system, and this energy gets distributed into different parts, all these three parts, id, ego and superego, which determines what kind of person is, determines the personality structure of that person. So, what are these id, ego and superego? So, id is basically related to instincts, unconscious part of the mind. What is id basically? So, it is a reservoir of psychic energy and operates on the pleasure principles. So, id is that part of human personality which is very unconscious, and it works only on the principle of pleasures. It does not understand anything else. So, a part of human mind or human personality is always attracted to pleasures, that is, it motivates us to seek pleasures and avoid pain. So, that is the only principles on which it works, id part of a human personality. It seeks pleasures, avoids pain, and it is mostly irrational, illogical and primitive drives which drives people to make immediate gratification of desires. So, its only intention is if it wants pleasure, so it wants it immediately. So, it does not have any other kind of intention, because it is derived from the unconscious part of human mind. So, id part, id part is that part of human personality which we all have, one aspect of personality which is id. It works on the pleasure principle, means it wants pleasures, avoid pains, and it is mostly irrational, it does not think logically or irrationally. If it wants something, it wants something without any logic or reasons. So, that is one part of human personality. It is mostly instinctual, part of unconscious mind. It is an immature component of human personality. This is the primary component of personality and only component present from birth. It is entirely unconscious. So, when a child takes birth, it is entirely composed of id only. So, child does not know anything else. Child does not have a logical, rational mind. It wants only pleasures and avoids pain. So, whatever will give pleasures, it will seek that, and if there is any pain, it will start crying. So, child behavior is completely governed by id part of the personality, because at that time a newborn child does not have any other part, only id part is there at birth, and the child will be governed by those pleasure principles only. So, a baby after birth is entirely ruled by id component of the personality. So, that is something which is very important. The next is ego part. As the child grows, somewhere around the age of 3, ego starts to develop. Now, Freud is not using ego here mostly in typical term of pride or something. Ego is more of a basic explanation. So, ego is that part of human personality which operates on reality principle. It ensures socially acceptable ways of id impulses. Now, at the age of around age 3, the child slowly starts to get more in touch with reality, and now it is not just blindly following what is based on pleasure principle. Now, child slowly understands things, and it learns to socially acceptable ways of expressing things. Slowly it learns. It is not completely at the age of 3, it starts learning from that age, around that age. So, it is the rational part of personality. Here the rationality develops. The child will now logically think, is it right, it is wrong, or kind of is it right in this moment or so on. Slowly this part develops. So, it is the rational part of the personality that develops, and it postpones the gratification of id impulse, because id wants immediate gratification. If you want to eat something, that id will say go and immediately eat it. Now, ego will say wait for the right moment, whenever it is appropriate time, then only you take it. So, that is the rational part of our personality. Slowly it develops at around the age of 3, and it develops throughout the adulthood. In order to deal with the reality, ego resort to defense mechanism by distorting reality. Ego sometimes is under tremendous pressure of id impulses, because id wants things immediately, and for ego it sometimes becomes full of anxiety is experienced by the ego, because it cannot fulfill all the demands all the time, because it is not of reality or it is not logical. So, many times we experience anxiety. So, ego resort to defense mechanisms. So, we will talk about what are these defense mechanisms in the next lecture, but this is what ego does. So, ego tries to balance the demand from the id and also from the superego that we will be talking about. So, ego is more, because it is in touch with the reality, it tries to balance everything. The third part is superego, which is the moral part of personality. It develops somewhere around the age of 5. Moral principles, slowly a child starts learning about the morality, means what is right, what is wrong, what is morally acceptable, what is morally unacceptable. Those concepts slowly a child starts learning from somewhere around the age of 5, and superego operates on the moral principle. So, it internalizes moral standards of right and wrong from the society and parents and directs our behavior to judgments. So, we learn lot of moral principles from our parents, what is appropriate behavior, what is inappropriate behavior, from the society and so on, from the teachers, and they get integrated into a part of the personality called superego. Superego means it is above ego. So, it is kind of also impacting it. So, superego focuses on ideal rather than real. So, that is the difference. Real is dealt by ego, ideal is dealt by superego. Ideal is focused on, superego focuses on what is ideal thing to do. Ego is not focused on what is ideal, it is focused on what is real, what is more realistic. So, that is the difference between ego and superego. So, if you see this diagram, where does it lies in the conceptualization of conscious and unconscious mind. So, if you see ego and superego, ego has mostly a large component comes under conscious part of the mind, some of it could be unconscious also. Superego also some part of it could be conscious, and largely it is also some part is unconscious. Id is completely unconscious. So, this is how kind of it can be looked at in terms of conscious and unconscious mind. So, this id, ego and superego continuously interact with each other all the time. So, there is a demand comes, there is something in the environment, some stimulus, id will say, let us say if it is pleasurable, it will say go and get it immediately. Superego will say is it right, it is morally right or wrong, in that part of the personality will judge that. Ego will see whether it is realistic or not, is it appropriate thing to do in this context or not. So, there is a constant kind of interaction between these three parts of personality, and based on which part is dominant, our personality is determined. What the typical characteristics of us will be determined by which part of our structure is dominant. So, for some people maybe id is dominant still, for some adult people we are talking about, some where ego may be dominant, for some superego may be dominant. So, based on that we can see typical patterns of behavior in the different individuals. So, personality characteristics and differences between people could emerge based on how much energy is there in the superego, how much of it is in the id part, how much of it is in the ego part. So, people differ in that distribution of energy based on how they were shaped from childhood. For example, a very dominant id person whose personality is dominant or determined mostly by the id impulses, let us say other part has not developed so much from the childhood. So, id was there during birth, ego was supposed to develop, then superego was supposed to develop, but let us say because of some social problems and other things, the child did not learn much about realistic thing, what is real and what is morally right and wrong. Those teaching did not get integrated in the personality of that person, let us say, and the ego id part remain dominant. So, what will happen, what will be the characteristics of such a person? Such a person may engage in behavior without concerns of appropriateness, such as a criminal. Let us say somebody who is a criminal, if you look at his behavior, that person will have very dominant id structure. So, for that person the ego and superego has not developed properly for whatever reason during childhood according to Freudian analysis. So, he is still dominated by the id impulses, whatever he feels like pleasurable, that person will do it without any concern whether it is right or wrong, whether it is appropriate or not. So, that let us say somebody behaving in a criminal, or somebody is a criminal. So, their id part may be very dominant. On the other hand, let us say somebody who has very dominant superego may become overly idealistic or moralistic or judgmental. Some people, if their superego is too dominant, they will be all the time looking at what is morally right, what is morally wrong. They may become too judgmental. Some people may be like that because too much of morality has gone into their superego. Superego is very dominant. Now, ego is the only part, according to Freud, that should develop actually properly, and we should have a very strong ego, not in the pride sense, but ego as a structure of personality, because if it is not properly developed, it will not be able to balance the demands from the id and superego. More realistic behavior will come from the ego itself. So, ego has a tough duty to balance the demands from both id and superego. Therefore, ego sometimes resort to various defense mechanism to maintain this balance, which we will be talking about in the next lecture. Various defense mechanism is used by ego to maintain this tension and anxiety from id part and superego part. So, there is a constant battle goes on. So, this is what just in a more of a pictorial way of depicting. So, if something happens, if you see something in the world, id will say I want that right now. If it is a pleasurable thing, if it is a painful thing, it will try to avoid it as much as possible. Superego will say good people don't think about those things. So, let us say you are angry with a person and this person said something bad to you. Id part of your personality will say go and immediately slap that person, or immediately show your anger to that person in terms of slapping that person or something, or kind of fighting with that person. So, id will immediately want that. Superego will say it is not morally right to harm another person. So, superego will interfere in that. Ego will say let us figure out a way to work together, means it will try to make balance. What is more appropriate in the situation? Maybe this is not the right time to slap that person, but maybe later on I will teach that person in a more appropriate way whatever wrong that person has done. So, ego will try to make balance and make it more appropriate to the realistic situation. So, that is how our three structures of personality work together, interact with each other. The last one principle that we will be talking about here is called as primary and secondary process thinking, which Freud talked about. The primary process thinking and secondary process thinking represent two different modes of thinking according to Freud. So, there are two different modes of thinking that people get engaged into. One is primary process thinking. In the primary process is mostly when we are dominated by the id, primary process thinking comes into the picture. It is an irrational and illogical form of thoughts often seen in the way young children think or the way we think in dreams. So, mostly under the influence of id, whenever we think, those thinking process typically are primary process thinking. So, when you think without there is not much logic involved in it. A lot of time when we are too emotional, under the influence of very strong emotions, we do not think logically, then things may look very irrational and thought processes could be highly irrational and so on. Many times children thinks in the primary mode of process of thinking, they do not understand much of logic, whatever according to their perspective, whatever things looks like correct, they will think in that way. And when we dream, the kind of processes happens, images and thought processes happens, could be typical case of primary process thinking, because there is no logic, there is no rationality in it. It is completely governed by id part of our personality, which is unconscious. In primary process thinking, there is no sense of time and boundaries between past, present and future blurs. So, which typically happens in dreams. There is a blur of time, you do not know past, present and future, where it is going. Desires and wishes are often expressed symbolically, such as in dreams, where desires for nourishment might appear as an image of food. So, image of food could reflect your craving for food and so on. So, this type of thinking is immediate and impulsive, driven by the need to fulfill urges without any consideration of practicality or reality. So, many times we also get engaged into fantasy thinking, which is also a typical case of primary process thinking, where you express your desires and wishes without any logic and those kind of things. So, that could also be a part of primary process thinking. And now, secondary process thinking is just opposite to that, it is more of ego driven realistic thinking. It is associated with ego, which mediates between the unrealistic demands of the id and the constraints of the reality. This mode of thinking operates according to the reality principles, which delays gratification until appropriate and possible. So, here mostly most of the logical thinking that we typically do under say in condition. So, those are like secondary process thinking. Unlike primary process thinking, secondary process thinking is rational, logical, structured. It involves planning, problem solving, decision making. All these things typically we do in our life comes under secondary process thinking. So, in the secondary process thinking, there is a clear understanding of the sequence of time, causality, recognizing past, present, future and so on. This type of thought processes considers consequences of actions, make decisions based on practicality, benefits, consequences, long term benefits and so on. When such kind of conscious thinking process happens, this is called as a secondary process thinking. For example, while primary process thinking might lead to a person to immediately seek food when hungry. So, when you are hungry, you will immediately try to find some food and do, let us say, that will be you are under influence of primary thinking. If you are under the influence of secondary thinking, you would try to plan and how to go to a place and whatever it is, you will plan and think stepwise and find appropriate solutions for any kind of problem that you have. So, that is more of a logical thinking, will come under secondary thinking. So, here is a comparison in a tabular form. Primary process thinking is illogical, irrational, mostly fantasy driven. Secondary process is logical, rational, reality oriented. Primary thinking, it desires and impulses are expressed without any delay, immediately it wants to do it. Here it is more based on practicality and appropriateness. Primary thinking often is unconscious, surfacing dreams or fantasies. Secondary process is typically conscious and deliberate process. For example of a primary thinking, dreaming of flying without any mechanical aid. So, for example, when we dream, we see we are flying without anything, which does not have any logic in the dream state. So, that is an example of primary thinking. If you are planning a trip considering budget, time, itinerary and so on, then it is an example of a secondary thinking. Some of the other examples of primary thinking are like imagining winning the lottery and quitting the job. So, sometimes we fantasize, if I win a lottery, I will quit the job and do this and that. So, those kind of fantasy thinking are part of primary thinking. And becoming, some people think overnight I will become a celebrity, and those kind of things are not typically logical, but you wish to become like that. Sometimes you fantasize about them. So, those are primary thinking. When you practically, logically, stepwise think about something and try to solve a problem, that is secondary thinking. So, these are some of the basic ideas behind psychoanalysis as proposed by the Freud. There are many ideas associated with psychoanalysis that we will be talking about in the next lecture. With this, I stop here. Thank you.